My name is Delia Crane. I'm 34 years old, and on the day we buried my grandmother, my parents handed the microphone to my sister and told me to sit down. What they didn't know, what none of us knew except me, was that 3 weeks before she died, my grandmother sat alone in her living room, pressed record on her phone, and said everything she'd been saving for exactly this moment. I had the audio file, I had the Bluetooth speaker, and when my sister finished her 4-minute performance about a woman she visited twice a year, I walked to the front of that room and I let my grandmother speak for herself. What she said changed every relationship in that family permanently. Some of them still haven't recovered, and I'm not sure they're supposed to. Before we get into it, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story earns it. Drop your city and your local time in the comments. I want to know where you are right now. Now let me take you back 6 years, to a Sunday kitchen in Macon, Georgia, and the woman who was the only person in my family who ever made me feel like I was exactly enough. My grandmother's name was Rosalie Crane. Everyone called her Ro. She was 78 years old, 4'11", and the kind of woman who could silence a room without raising her voice. She'd raised 4 children in a 3-bedroom house on Sycamore Street, worked 31 years as a seamstress at Hartwell Fabrics, and every Sunday without exception made a pot of chicken and dumplings large enough to feed whoever showed up. She never turned anyone away from that table, not once. My mother, Patricia, was Ro's oldest. Then came Uncle Darren, Aunt Sheila, and Uncle Marcus. 4 kids, for different people, but one clear favorite in the grandchildren department, and it wasn't me. My sister Vanessa is 3 years older. Blonde highlights she refreshes every 6 weeks, the kind of laugh that fills a room, the kind of woman who gets described as magnetic by people who've known her for 20 minutes. She played varsity tennis, graduated from the University of Georgia with a communications degree, married a commercial real estate developer named Brett who wore loafers without socks year-round. My parents, Gerald and Patricia Crane, loved Vanessa the way some people love a mirror, because looking at her reflected exactly who they wanted to be. I was a librarian, am a librarian. 12 years at the Macon-Bibb County Public Library, Children's Division. I knew every picture book published between 1952 and the present by spine color. I could read aloud in 6 different character voices. I organized the summer reading program that served 400 kids a year and wrote the grant application that expanded it to 2 new branches. My parents thought this was nice. The way you think a houseplant is nice. Present, undemanding, easy to forget. Ro didn't forget me, not once. Every Sunday I'd drive the 20 minutes to Sycamore Street. Vanessa came at Christmas and Easter, sometimes Thanksgiving if Brett's family didn't have plans. My parents came most Sundays, but they brought Vanessa's problems with them, her kitchen renovation, Brett's new contract, whether they'd summer in Hilton Head or Savannah. Ro would listen, nod, and the moment there was a gap, she'd find me in the kitchen and we'd talk about books, about the kids at the library, about the little boy who'd read the entire Percy Jackson series in 11 days and cried when it was over because he didn't want to leave that world. She understood that, she told me once, the grief of finishing a book you loved, the specific loneliness of having to come back. She also understood something else, something she never said directly until she was dying, but that I felt every Sunday, in the way she made sure my bowl was full before anyone else's, in the way she kept a copy of whatever I was currently reading on her nightstand so we could talk about it, in the way she once told my mother, quietly, but clearly enough that I heard it from the hallway, "Patricia, that girl sees more than you give her credit for. One day that's going to matter." My mother changed the subject. She always changed the subject when it was about me. Ro was diagnosed with congestive heart failure in February of the year she died. Stage 3. The cardiologist at Navicent Health was straightforward with her, not brutal, but honest. With management, she had 12 to 18 months, without intervention. Less. Roe chose management but refused aggressive treatment. She was 78. She'd buried a husband, a sister, and 2 close friends in the last decade. She wasn't afraid of dying. She was afraid of dying badly in a hospital room with machines doing the work her body had already decided to stop. I drove her to her appointments. Every one. My mother came to the first 2, then work got complicated. Vanessa sent a flower arrangement when she heard the diagnosis. White lilies in a tall vase. Ro looked at them for a long moment, then said, "They're funeral flowers, Delia." She sent me funeral flowers. Then she put them on the porch. So she didn't have to look at them. Over those months, our Sundays changed. Less chicken and dumplings, she tired more easily, and standing at the stove for an hour wasn't manageable anymore. More sitting, more talking. I'd bring food from the deli on Forsyth Street and we'd sit at her kitchen table with the window open and talk for 3 or 4 hours at a stretch. She told me things she'd never told anyone, about the early years of her marriage, the lean ones, when my grandfather worked double shifts and she sewed alterations at the kitchen table after the kids were in bed to cover the electric bill, about the miscarriage between my mother and Uncle Darren that nobody in the family knew about the specific exhaustion of being a black woman in a fabric factory in 1974 and learning to make herself smaller every day so the white supervisors felt comfortable. She told me about the things she was proud of, not the things the family celebrated, not the grandchildren's graduations or the holidays she'd hosted, the things she was privately, quietly proud of. The fact that she'd read over 400 books in her lifetime and kept a handwritten list of every one. The fact that she'd saved enough to pay for her own funeral so no one would have to carry that weight. The fact that she had, in her words, loved the right people in the right ways even when it cost me. I asked her once what she meant by that last part. She was quiet for a moment, looking out at the backyard where my grandfather had planted a peach tree in 1987 that still produced every summer. "I mean, I love your mother," she said, "and I love Vanessa, but I've spent 30 years watching your mother pour everything into that girl and leave you standing in the doorway waiting, and I never said it loud enough. That's a cost I'm going to die carrying." I told her she didn't have to carry anything. She looked at me with those eyes of hers, sharp, tired, still entirely present, and said, "No, but I can put it down before I go." I didn't know what she meant then. 3 weeks before she died, I found out. It was a Tuesday afternoon in October. I'd come by to bring groceries and found her sitting in her armchair in the living room, phone in her lap, wearing her good church blouse, the navy one with the pearl buttons she reserved for Sundays and occasions. I asked why she was dressed up on a Tuesday. She told me she'd been recording something important and she wanted to look right for it. "What were you recording?" I asked. She smiled. "The full one, not the polite one. My eulogy." I sat down on the ottoman across from her. She handed me her phone. The audio file was labeled simply, "For the funeral. Play this." "I can't write a speech the way some people can," she told me. "My hands aren't steady enough anymore for a long letter. But I can still talk, and there are things that need to be said over my body that I don't trust anyone else to say." She paused. "I trust you to make sure it gets heard." I asked her if she'd told my mother about it. She shook her head. "Your mother will plan a beautiful funeral. She's very good at beautiful things. But she'll put Vanessa at that microphone and Vanessa will say something lovely about a woman she didn't really know. And that's the last thing anyone will hear about my life. I don't want that." I asked her what she wanted instead. "The truth," she said, "delivered by someone who was actually there." I took the audio file. I transferred it to my phone. I saved it in 3 places: my phone, my email, a folder on my laptop labeled Ro because she made me promise I wouldn't lose it. She was specific about the technology. She asked if I knew how to connect a phone to a Bluetooth speaker. I told her I did. She nodded like this was exactly what she needed to hear. She died on a Thursday morning in November, quietly in her own bed, the way she'd wanted. I was there. My mother and Vanessa were 40 minutes away when it happened. By the time they arrived, Ro had already been gone for an hour. I'd spent that hour sitting next to her, finishing the last 40 pages of the book we'd been reading together, because it seemed like the right thing to do. My mother planned the funeral in 4 days. She was efficient in grief the way she was efficient in everything: lists, phone calls, decisions made before anyone thought to weigh in. The venue was Mount Calvary Baptist, where Ro had been a member for 51 years. The flowers were white roses. The reception would follow at my parents' house. On the second day, my mother called me and Vanessa into the dining room. She had a yellow legal pad with bullet points, readings, music selections, the photo slideshow. Then she got to the eulogy. "Vanessa, I'd like you to speak." She said it the way she said everything about Vanessa, as a declaration, not a question, a conclusion that had already been reached before the conversation started. Vanessa looked up from her phone. "Of course, whatever you need, Mom." My mother looked at me. "Delia, you'll do the reading. 2 Corinthians. A Bible passage. 2 minutes of someone else's words." She moved on to the next bullet point. I didn't say anything. Not then. I thought about the audio file on my phone. I thought about Ro in her navy blouse, sitting straight in that armchair, pressing record. I thought about her saying, "There are things that need to be said over my body that I don't trust anyone else to say." I said, "That sounds fine, Mom," and I let her. Move to the next bullet point. If you've ever been in a room where your family made a decision about something that mattered to you and acted like your opinion was a formality they'd already accounted for, drop a word in the comments. Just one word. I want to know I'm not alone in this. And if you think you know where this is going, stay, because what happened in that church surprised even me. The night before the funeral, I sat at my kitchen table with my phone, the small Bluetooth speaker I'd borrowed from the library's audiovisual room, and a legal pad of my own. I listened to Ro's recording 4 times straight through. It was 11 minutes and 43 seconds long. Her voice was slower than it used to be. The heart failure had taken something from her breath, but her words were exact, deliberate. She'd thought about this for a long time before she pressed record. There was no rambling, no searching for the right phrase. She knew what she wanted to say and she said it. She talked about her life, the factory, my grandfather, the 4 children she raised on Sycamore Street and what each of them had taught her, the hard way and the good way both. She talked about her faith, not as performance but as something she'd argued with and returned to and argued with again over 60 years until it felt like her own. She talked about what she wanted people to do after she was gone, specifically, not vaguely. Read more. Call your difficult people. Eat the good food on regular days, not just occasions. And then, in the last 2 minutes, she talked about me. Not in the way people talk about you at funerals, the soft, careful language that sands off every edge. She talked about me the way she talked about books she loved, precisely, with evidence. She named the Sunday mornings, the library program, the specific conversations we'd had over specific meals. She said, "Delia was here, every week she was here. And I need everyone in that room to understand what it means when someone just shows up, week after week, without being asked, without being celebrated for it, without needing anyone to notice." She paused in the recording. I could hear her breathing. That is love. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind I have been most grateful for in my life." Then she said, "I asked Delia to play this because I knew if I left it to anyone else, it wouldn't get played. That's not an accusation. That's just the truth about how families work. Some people get the microphone. Some people do the work. I wanted to be the one to say, out loud, over my own body, which one of them I was proudest of." I listened to that part 4 times. Then I put the speaker in my bag, went to bed, and did not sleep. Mount Calvary Baptist held 220 people and it was full. Roe had known everyone. The pews were packed with women from her sewing circle, men my grandfather had worked with, families from the neighborhood who'd eaten at her table over 5 decades. The flowers were exactly as my mother had ordered them. The photo slideshow was beautiful. She was very good at beautiful things. Vanessa spoke for 4 minutes and 6 seconds. I timed it from the pew. She talked about Rose cooking. She talked about Christmas mornings on Sycamore Street. She used the word matriarch twice and legacy 3 times. She teared up at the end, genuine tears. I don't doubt that Vanessa had feelings. She just didn't always know where they came from, and the room responded the way rooms respond to beautiful, practiced grief. Soft applause, nodding. My mother was in the front pew with her hands folded, satisfied. Vanessa sat back down and my mother squeezed her hand. The pastor signaled me for the scripture reading. I stood, walked to the front of the room, and opened my Bible to 2 Corinthians. I read the passage, all of it clearly, every word. Then I closed the Bible, and I didn't sit down. I reached into my bag and I set the Bluetooth speaker on the podium, small, black, about the size of a hardcover book. Someone in the 3rd row shifted. My mother looked up. I saw her expression change, not alarm yet, just a tightening around the eyes. Before I sit down, I said, "I need to share something." My voice was steady. I'd spent 12 years reading aloud to children in a quiet library. I knew how to hold a room with a calm voice. I knew that calm was louder than volume if you used it right. 3 weeks before she died, my grandmother recorded something. She asked me to play it at her funeral. She was specific about that request. She made me promise. I paused. The room was completely still. 220 people. My mother's hands had come unfolded in her lap. "I keep my promises to Roe," I said. So, I pressed play. Her voice filled that church like she was standing in the room. That voice low, unhurried, carrying 50 years of Sunday mornings and difficult truths delivered with grace. Half the room recognized it immediately. I heard someone say, "Oh," softly, involuntarily, the way you say it when something unexpected breaks you open a little. She talked for 11 minutes and 43 seconds. The room did not move. The pastor, who had not been told about this, sat in his chair behind the pulpit with his hands folded and his eyes closed, listening the way you listen to something sacred. When she got to the part about me, I felt it move through the pews. The specific, terrible physics of a truth landing in a room full of people who hadn't known it. My mother's friend Gloria pressed her handkerchief to her mouth. My Aunt Sheila, 3 rows back, reached over and took Uncle Marcus's hand. Vanessa was perfectly still. Beside my mother, staring at the speaker on the podium, "That is love," Rose's voice said. "The kind that doesn't announce itself." My mother's shoulders were shaking. I couldn't tell from where I stood if it was grief or something else. I looked at my father, Gerald, quiet at her side. He'd been quiet through the whole planning, quiet through the whole week. He was looking at the floor. When the recording ended, the silence lasted a long time, long enough to mean something. I picked up the speaker. I placed it back in my bag. I looked at the room. "Thank you," I said. "She wanted you to hear that." I walked back to my seat, my heels on the hardwood floor. That sound again, measured, deliberate, the sound of someone who knows exactly where they're going. I sat down. The pastor stood, and in 30 years of delivering eulogies, I believe he had never had to follow something like that. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I don't think there's much I can add to what Rosalie just told us herself," and he moved into the closing prayer. The reception was at my parents' house. White tablecloths, catered food, the kind of gathering where people move through rooms saying the same 4 sentences to each other. "She's at peace now. She lived a full life. You must be exhausted. She would have loved this." I filled a plate and found a corner near the window that looked out. At the backyard, the same geometry of yard that backed up against Rose Yard on Sycamore Street. Different house, same sky. Aunt Sheila found me first. She wrapped both arms around me from behind and didn't say anything for a full 30 seconds. Then she said, "I didn't know, Delia. I want you to know that I didn't know." I told her I knew. She pulled back and looked at me. "Every Sunday." I nodded. She closed her eyes. "Every Sunday," she repeated quietly to herself, like she was adding it to a list. Uncle Marcus came next, then Rose's friend Beatrice from the sewing circle, who grabbed my face in both her small dry hands and said, "Your grandmother loved you like a main character, baby. Don't you let anybody put you in the background again." I held on to that one. My mother came last. Everyone else had found me in that corner first, which told me something about the ordering of things. She stood across from me with a glass of sweet tea she wasn't drinking. Her makeup had been repaired. She was very good at that too. She looked at me for a long moment. "You could have told me," she said, "about the recording." "I could have," I said. "Ro asked me not to." "She asked you not to tell me." It wasn't quite a question. She wanted it to be heard. She was worried it wouldn't be, if too many people knew about it ahead of time. I kept my voice even, not cold, just clear. She trusted me to make sure. That happened. I did. My mother looked out the window. "The things she said, about you, were true," I said. A long pause. "I know," she said. And her voice, for the first time I could remember in years, had no performance in it. No management, no redirection. Just 2 plain words carrying about 30 years of weight. I know they were. She didn't hug me. I didn't expect her to. We weren't there yet. She just stood with me at the window for a few minutes, looking out at the same sky, and then she went to speak to someone else. It was the most honest exchange we'd had in a decade. That was enough for one day. Vanessa didn't come to me at the reception. I didn't go to her either. We'd been living in different worlds for so long that grief hadn't closed the distance. If anything, it had clarified it. She left before the catered food was cleared. Brett was in the driveway with the car running. She texted me 3 days later. That was hard to hear. I read it twice, wrote back, "I know." She didn't respond after that, not for 2 weeks. When she finally called, I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't ready. I didn't know what we were building toward, and I wasn't going to pretend I did. She left a message, 4 minutes long. I listened to it once, sitting in my car outside the library before my morning shift. She talked about feeling blindsided, about not understanding. That I'd been that present with Ro, about a specific memory. She was 14. Ro had taken me school shopping and not her, and she'd been jealous and never said it, and she'd been carrying it since. She said, "I think I've been making you pay for that for 20 years and I didn't even know I was doing it." I sat with that for a long time. Then I went inside and read picture books to a group of 4-year-olds who were furious that the very hungry caterpillar got to eat all that food and they didn't. I called Vanessa back that evening. We talked for an hour. Not warmly, not the way sisters are supposed to in the movies. Honestly, which is harder and I think more valuable. She asked me about the Sundays. I told her, Not as an accusation, just as a fact, every Sunday for 6 years. She was quiet for a long time after that. Then she said, "I didn't know she was sick that long." I said, "I know." She said, "I should have been there." I said, "Yes." There was a pause. Then she said, "Can I be there now? For whatever's left to do? The house, the things, all of it?" I thought about it. "You can help," I said, "but I've been doing it alone for a long time. I'm not going to pretend it's equal." She said, "That's fair. That was the beginning of something. I don't know yet what it becomes. But it was the first real thing we'd said to each other in years, and I'll take a real thing over a comfortable lie every time." My parents started couples counseling in January. I didn't find out directly. Aunt Sheila told me, carefully, the way she shared things she wasn't sure I was ready for. Apparently the funeral had opened something between them. My father, Gerald, who had spent 30 years being the quiet man beside my mother's certainty, had started talking about what he'd witnessed, about the ways he'd stayed silent when silence wasn't neutral. My mother called me 6 weeks after the funeral. Not to manage, not to redirect. She asked if she could take me to lunch. We went to the diner on Riverside Drive, the one where Ro used to take me on my birthday every year. I hadn't been back since she died, and my mother didn't know that. She chose it because it was neutral. The timing was its own kind of accident. We sat in the booth by the window. She ordered the same thing Ro always ordered: chicken salad on wheat. No tomato, and I don't think she realized she'd done it. I didn't point it out. She told me she'd been thinking about the recording, about the specific things Ro had said, about how long it had been since she'd driven to my apartment and sat at my table and asked me about my life, not my job as a formality, not a quick Sunday call, but actually sat down and asked. She said, "I don't have an answer for why I didn't. I've been trying to find one and I don't have it, but I want to start doing it, if you'll let me." I looked at this woman, my mother, 62 years old, Patricia Crane, who had never in my memory asked for anything, who presented every preference as a decision already made, sitting across from me asking permission. It was the strangest and most hopeful thing she'd ever offered me. "I'll let you," I said, "but you have to actually show up. Not as a project, not with an agenda. Just show up." She nodded. "I can do that." Ro showed up, I said. "That's what she was telling us. That's the whole thing." My mother looked at her plate. "I know," she said. "She was also telling me she raised me, and I still missed the point." She said it without bitterness, which surprised me, like someone who'd finally found the right word for something that had been nameless for years. We finished lunch. She paid. She hugged me at the cars, a real one. Both arms longer than comfortable, the kind you only do when you mean it. I let her. Ro's house on Sycamore Street sold in March. We cleaned it out together, the 4 siblings and me. Vanessa came for 3 of the 4 weekends. That was new. She didn't take charge the way she usually did in family settings. She asked where things should go. She deferred on the things that had meaning and stepped up on the things that were just logistics. Progress isn't always dramatic. In the hall closet, behind 30 years of winter coats and spare quilts, I found her handwritten list, every book she'd ever read, in a composition notebook with her name on the cover in her careful seamstress handwriting, 412 titles. Beside each one, a date and one sentence, not a summary, just one thing she'd taken from it. "I'm having it bound, a real binding cloth cover, her name embossed on the front. I'm putting it in the library's local history collection where it belongs, where anyone can read it, where a kid who needs it can find it and know that a woman from Sycamore Street read 400 books and thought every one of them was worth a sentence. It's the most librarian thing I've ever done. Ro would have loved that. I still go to Sycamore Street sometimes. The new family has a dog that barks at squirrels, which Ro would have found delightful. The peach tree my grandfather planted in 1987 is still there, still producing. The new owners told me they weren't planning to touch it when I mentioned it, sheepishly, in the driveway one afternoon. Like the woman who can't stop coming back, they said. We figured something that old had earned its place. Yes, I thought, it had. I think about what Rose said in that recording, in those last 2 minutes, in the part that quieted an entire church full of people who thought they already knew who she was. The part about love that doesn't announce itself, the part about showing up without being celebrated for it. I've been a librarian for 12 years. I read to children who'll grow up and forget I existed. I write grant applications that other people receive credit for. I organize summer reading programs that run on a quiet engine most people never see. And every Sunday for 6 years I drove to Sycamore Street and sat at a kitchen table with a woman who was dying and talked to her like she was still fully, completely here because she was. Nobody gave me a microphone for that. Nobody moved me to table one. But my grandmother pressed record on a Tuesday afternoon in October and said my name into a phone in an empty living room and made sure it would reach me. I was there. Every week, I was there. And she made sure everyone knew it. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been the one who showed up quietly, who did the work, without the recognition, who loved someone fully in the spaces nobody was watching, leave me a comment. Tell me about your person. Tell me about your Ro. And if you're watching this and you have a person like that in your life right now, someone who shows up every week without being asked, without being celebrated, call them today. Not a text, a call. Tell them you see them. Because the most devastating thing in my grandmother's recording wasn't anything she said about my sister or my mother. It was the simple fact that she felt she had to record it herself, that she couldn't trust it would be said otherwise. Don't let the people who love you quietly go to their graves doing that math. I'll see you next time.